Are you guys familiar with a food product called pink slime?
I'm familiar with the Ghostbusters 2 pink slime.
I was going to say, not the Ghostbusters one. Okay, so there is a food product called pink slime. It got the nickname pink slime, right? I think so. A reporter coined like a nickname pink slime.
Right.
So basically, it's like it's a meat byproduct that was used as like a filler with ground beef. And this hit the news like back in the mid 2012, 2010s, I think somewhere early 2010s, right? Yeah. Where it was like, hold on a minute, my burgers aren't all beef. Like, no. They also have this byproduct filler in them called pink slime. So the reason like this has been co-opted to mean something else now, the reason being that it's basically something claiming to be something else. That's kind of the analogy here, if you want to call it
filler. Yeah.
It's the filler. Yeah. So this has now been co-opted into a term called pink slime sites, or pink slime websites. So the news here, and the reason we're talking about this is because they have now outnumbered actual legitimate sites. So we'll talk about what's a legitimate and what's a pink slime site. So legitimate, like a local news site is what we're talking about here. So think like your, I don't know, WCBS Fox74.com or whatever it is, right? Your local kind of news site, or your UtahMorning.com news site, whatever it is, right? There's a bunch, think of a million different names. They're all generic, they all have these web pages. So a legitimate local news sites are unfortunately like on the decline, right? We're losing, the study done that we're losing 2.5 per week of local newspaper sites at the moment. That's crazy, like across the US. But overall, the number of local news sites is staying about the same. The reason being they are being backfilled with something called a pink slime site. So what's a pink slime site? A pink slime site is a website posing as a local news site. They're often funded by a partisan group. They generally push an agenda, left or right, or some other kind of agenda. Doesn't matter, but they generally have an agenda. And they often hide their funding, they hide their ownership, they hide their agenda. And the articles that are on them are either, these days, AI created, just junk, or they repost like stats from states and local stories. And I'm going to show you some killer examples of this, because it's like, when I went down this rabbit hole of like discovering this, I'm like, wow, this is crazy, crazy stuff. So these now outnumber actual legitimate local news sites. Somebody counted, so NewsGuard, who is a reputable source, reported there are now 1,265 pink slime news sites compared to 1,213 legitimate local news sites. So they now have overtaken it. They've tripled since 2019. This is becoming like a more and more thing. Seems like eventually this is all we're going to end up with.
Oh yeah.
Including some that they found were actually owned by or ran out of Russia, which surprise, right? Russia pushing an agenda in the US, like that's really shocking. Exactly. So I thought I'd show you some of these because I thought this was interesting. One that came up an example was this one, Chicago City Wire, and I was like, oh, interesting. Okay, here's the thing: looks like a legitimate news site, right? So if your first barrier to when you're looking at something online is that it looks like a news site, that's no longer a factor in your trust. You should not, because it looks like a news site does not mean you should trust it.
Right.
And if you look at some of these stories, then I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Look at this. So,
and it doesn't look overly like saturated either.
No, I do have ad blocker on, by the way, too. But
there's that.
That might look some stuff.
It might,
but that might have been some
look different. Yeah.
But here's some telltale signs. Look, so it has a not a very well written headline, kind of a terrible headline. It's published by Chicago City Wire, so there's no reporter attached to this. And then you start reading the story, and it has all of these links down here, all of these obviously generated school names, and it has this kind of article, which is just a stat. This is just a stat and a graph, and then look at the rest of the article. It is just a number of schools listed with, in this case, they're talking about Native American population in those schools.
Yeah.
And you just keep scrolling down. It is just junk. It's an absolute junk article.
Yeah.
Who's the woman in the picture?
Yeah, I know.
The woman... So the one in the picture, if you look, here you go. It is J. Sterling Morton, freshman center principal. So a principal of a school. And actually, that made me think, because here's this story. Look, you're going to love this. This is New Public Arts Installment. Look, and it has, again, by Chicago News Wire. This is Director of Special Events and Permits, LinkedIn. Look, I don't think it has any relation to what the story's even about. And the story is clearly AI generated. It's just junk. It is absolute junk. But it's presented as Chicago City Wire. So I'm like, who is this? Who's Chicago City Wire? So go to the About section. And they have a section down here. And this kind of proves the point that this is a pink slime site. They talk about their agenda, their core beliefs. They believe in limited government, constructive role of free market. This is a basically libertarian kind of viewpoint here. And that their funding comes from, in part, by advocacy groups who share our beliefs in limited government. This is not news. This is propaganda presented as news. So I started looking at where this kind of came from. And here's some other sites, by the way. If you look down the bottom here, it's a whole bunch of these. This has like 30 odd sites down here listed in the other publication section. If we look at one of these, it's a carbon copy of that site with, again, local news on it with the exact same stuff.
Do they have any from North Carolina? Any ones we can look at?
Yes, there is. So, funny that you ask.
Funny you should ask.
Funny you should ask. I found Metric
Your
Media,
check is in the
who I thought was different. I was like, oh, this is another company doing a similar kind of thing, and I was like, oh, select your state, cool. We can look at North Carolina and see what's here, right? And I was like, oh, let's go see if they have a local one for us. We'll do North Carolina, and then we'll go down to the bottom here because there is a Winston-Salem version, Winston-Salem Times. And you click on it. It's winstonssalemtimes.com. And look at that.
That's Alan Joynes right there, the mayor.
This, by the way, I did not know was related to this at all. I found these through two totally different places. This I found just through a link. This I found through this Metric Media site. Yet clearly they are related. This is clear. It's the same designed website look. Clearly it's related. And again,
management system, yeah.
Exactly. Same CMS they're using, look. And it's the same thing. Again, published by Winston-Salem Times, look.
Right,
I was like, okay.
Look for Lehigh. Look for Lehigh.
They've used the same, I'm sure there is one. They've used the same pictures, look, for all those stories that they used. And then I started looking and I noticed, oh, look, there's a person here too. An actual person wrote this story. Like, that's interesting, isn't it? I was like, oh, okay. So what happens if you Google that person?
I'm
what do you think happens?
Is it a real person?
It is not a real person.
Oh, look at that. North Rally today.
North Rally, New Mexico, some Catholic Tribune thing, Federal Newswire, South Marquee.
Wow.
This is not a real person.
No.
NPR actually did a story on it, so I found her name.
In Todd, North Carolina.
Right. I found a story on her here. Look, somebody from NPR was actually asking about this person because they'd noticed too that this person came up in these stories, and they're like, consider Kane County's reporter, Laurier Lubbert, 15 years ago, reporter from Virginia. Pilot had the same name. Lubbert has no account on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook. Unusual for a reporter. This is not a real reporter. It's fake. It's fake. Everything on this site is fake. The entire thing is fake, pushing an agenda. But here's what I looked at too. This one has a different list of articles, and also their about section is also different.
Sure. So
they're using the same content management system, which is highly suspicious.
Sure.
The same template, same CMS. Yet this one has a different kind of agenda attached to it as well. This Metric Media LLC is a non-profit, but yet they own all of these like local news sites.
Right.
It's like, my point here being, the internet today, you cannot believe something that is a news site, news in quotes. You have to be more diligent and check your sources here. This has to be a thing we have to get better about, because the problem is, we're in a time where we read the headline and then we share the information. So coming back to your story of earlier with the AI generated content, this is the same thing. It's just in a written format and en masse. There are thousands of these. Don't forget, they found 1,265 of these pink sites. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen stuff, and this was years ago too, where like I would come across, and I don't even remember where, but like maybe in Google News or something like that. Or maybe it was like a footer of something, but I'd see like Lehigh is voted the best city in like Utah or whatever. And I'm like, oh, really? That's cool. And like I click on it and it's a junk site. And I'm like, oh, like they just changed the name of the city and like push that out, like Winston-Salem is voted the best in whatever.
All right, which one of these is close to you? Which one of these sites is close to you?
These are your only options.
Probably
Davis Times. I like that
probably
one.
Utah Valley. Probably Utah Valley. Davis is too far north.
I was just thinking about my last names.
Yeah. This one, Utah Valley Times.
Utah Valley, yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, okay. I just noticed that the North Carolina one had the "Where's the cheapest gas?" That's the same story.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, that's the thing. Yeah. A lot of these stories are the same. Yeah. That's the other thing you'll notice too.
Utah kids. How much did the women's team? How much did the men's team spend?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. You'll start noticing these, and you're like, "Oh, look at that."
Yeah.
It's just junk.
Yeah,
it's just,
for sure.
and I'm assuming these must be. I mean, these are generated, right? I don't think there's too much content here for people to be doing this.
No,
this is just this is on autopilot. This says every so often publish a new story and publish about it what you want. I think here's our agenda. Here's what we want you to write about.
Yeah,
please write it.
Yeah.
And Bobby and I were talking about this earlier. Like, well, what does that story have an agenda about? And it's like it's not a singular story that has to have an agenda. It's a collection of them. It's a collection that then publishes on a website that has an agenda that then is en masse on 1,200 websites that has an agenda. And now all of a sudden you start reading this stuff. And if you start seeing enough of it, you start believing what it's about. Yeah. If there's a fact in one of them that you believe is trustworthy, then you believe the other thing that is also
the one thing I would
as a fact, but
sort of push back on this is anyone really reading this? Like, is any humans consuming this? Or is everything just bot to bot and the internet's going to collapse because no one's really using it?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about the stats on this, but I will say, I guarantee you people are looking at and sharing these stories in the same way that somebody looked at and shared Sarah's video from earlier. If it supports your position, you're gonna like it and share it. That's just how it works. So if something's on here that you like and you're like, I wouldn't be surprised if this one here about cheap gas, people did say, oh yeah, look, if somebody in Clemens is like, hey, don't go to that thing at gas stations, Mom, go to the one over in Winston-Salem. Like, it's cheaper. Right. So I could definitely see this getting shared. And by the way, this is just like the Regulatory Commission picture. Like, it's just
it's just random. Yeah.
Well, and
because AI chose it.
Yeah. To your point, like, I don't necessarily think every article here is meant to be consumed. I think they'll have like some articles that they mean to share out, but the rest of the site gives legitimacy to that one article. Because
you
look at that one article that has the agenda and like, and that's the one being shared, where you're like, oh, what kind of site is this? Like, is this legitimate? Is this a legitimate source? And then you look around, you're like, oh yeah, there's other articles here. It looks legit. Like, so this seems like a legitimate source.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think it's the problem obviously stems from the fact that local news these days, I don't know if you've seen local news these days, it's pretty bad.
Well, go to Lehigh Free Press. That's our local news.
How do I spell that?
Lehigh, L-E-H-I, sorry. L-E-H-I, Free Press. Like, this is our legit local news site.
Okay, but look how like similar it looks to the other side too. Look, it's like this is what gives it credibility.
At the top, man. Look at that.
Yeah. Other than clearly this stands it apart from all the others.
Yeah.
But you're right. This is similar kind of content too. Look, really, when you think about it, we're talking about the number one story is like who was crowned Miss Lehigh 2024. You know, it's not breaking news. But if you've watched this kind of like local news or local newspapers or anything, they've cut back to a point where they're not really reporting on news anymore. At least here, definitely here, they're not where we are. Yeah. They don't have reporters really anymore. They're not going out and reporting on news. We were talking about earlier, Bobby and I, like, let's say that an accident happens. Bobby was like, well, they'll report on the accident. Like, yeah, they will, but they won't send like a news crew there anymore. Right. It'll be a bullet point on the screen that just says, oh, by the way, this road's closed because of an accident.
Right.
Aliens
they don't
landed. We don't have no one out there, though.
Yeah, aliens landed as a scroller across the bottom. Yeah.
I actually
but we
saw
don't have
that
a
in the
reporter
New York
to send
Post
out.
where they said that 12 people saw aliens at this outdoor festival.
Oh, nice.
And not a single picture. I'm like, come on, man. Everyone has an iPhone. Shut up.
Yeah. Like, anybody would get that on video for sure.
What are we talking about, man?
Yeah.
So the fact that local news is like not very good and kind of closing down, obviously 2.5 per week, are shutting down like local newspapers and local reporting. So it's created like a void, and obviously they're filling in the void with whatever they want to fill in the void with, whatever you want to say is your agenda. And I'm saying this isn't just right, this isn't just left, this isn't just either. It's not all political either.
Right.
There's people with other agendas. Let's say that you're into like pro farming or something. They can have one that has an agenda. right? It's like there can be any kind of agenda, and you just push that through news.
Right.
What's the end game for this? So think of this forward. So like if they're doing this to run ads on it, which a lot of these sites are running ads on it, Google Ads, it seems like if you're running a legitimate Google ad campaign, you're overpaying because there's so many of these zombie sites out there, pink zombie sites that are running ads on them.
Because that's not the point. It's not about ads anymore.
But what I'm asking is like, do you think the consumer of the people that are buying ads are finally going to say, how much are you charging me for this? And how many eyeballs actually are there? Like, and does that eventually where the internet just eats itself? Like where Google
Sure, but I don't think that's the point of this anymore. Yeah. I don't think they're trying to make money through running ads by having these at volume. They're just trying to push an agenda.
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. If you but
people have to read these things though.
They do.
Don't read them.
They do, but
I'm a different audience maybe, but
yeah. People do. That's the thing. And it's been proven, like if you keep telling somebody something and you get your news from one singular source, you will end up having that same opinion. You will be swayed of it, even if you're not initially, you will be swayed into that. That's just how it works. So it's psychological. They understand that.
I always tell people to always type in URLs. Don't click on links.
Amen.
Just type them in. 100%. And then if you hear of a news story, like I was telling Kevin when we talked about that earlier, that I saw a news story on Twitter of all places where people get their news from Twitter. And it was like Sunday about Joe Biden's going to be in hospice by Monday, discussing the day performance. And I'm like, he's not going to be in hospice, man. I mean, he could walk on stage. I'm not saying he's the pinnacle of health. He's not going to go run a mile or anything, but like at the same time, he's not dead either. And so we do have
hospice,
these. Yeah, exactly. That's usually you got a week or so,
Right. You're on the edge.
You're on the edge. And this is the problem with social media as our news source too. Like there's just, people will post anything. The deep fakes for the governor, and we got my friends on the Republican side will say things. It's just like, come on, man, we won the debate. It's okay. Just say good. You don't have to make up other stories about it.
Right. Exactly. You don't have to tell untruths about it.
You don't have to make anything up. It's all right. And I think in general, you shouldn't
Truth
make stuff up.
Truth is better than fiction, right?
It always is. It always is, But I'm just wondering, like in general, like the internet in general, when Google's out there creating AI links that describe websites, and these websites suddenly can't get ad revenue, when does this website as we know it just utterly collapse?
I think we've almost passed. Yeah, I think we've almost passed that barrier. It seems like it's mostly bots right now,
especially on social media.
Yeah, I think we've passed the point in time where we have the data to actually even train an AI from a clean data source. Because don't forget, when we train, let's say when OpenAI scraped the entire internet and trained their LLM, because we know that's what happened, right? That point in time, there was no AI generated content on there, so it was a clean environment. Now it's not. So now it's like you said, it's feeding itself. The AI is like creating content that's now feeding back to the AI. I don't know what the outcome of that is, but it can't be good.
Here's my wild prediction. We can come back to this in 2 years.
Okay.
It's going to be a new top-level domain.
Interesting.
Like a trusted domain or something that has to be
vetted.
What, like non-AI generated or something? Is that what you're saying?
New top-level domain in the internet, and it's going to be segmented off because it's going to be junk over here.
Interesting. That's a good thought. And I feel like that's maybe even a good solution to the problem. But we need to figure out what that vetting process looks like. Because
yes.
Well, I mean,
because OpenAI is just going to scrape it again, by the way, just so we're aware.
And we want to make sure actual people are getting vetted properly,
and that's the point, right? Who polices it? That's
right. And
we're never going to be able to agree who polices it, because somebody's going to say you can't have Truth Social on there. Somebody's going to say you can't have Instagram on there or TikTok because of China or whatever it is.
Right.
It's going to be there's a million reasons for stuff that can't go on it, and it's like it's a problem.
It's going to be called Internet.
I like the idea.
Internet 2. I love it.
Web
2.0. Well, there's already been Web 2.0.
Yeah, we'll be at Web 5.0 by the time it comes out,
Yeah, it'll at least be Web 4, right? We kind of have a failed Web 3 with, crypto and everything.